Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I will do a little bit of housekeeping to get us started. So today's webinar is about implementing the My Team Around Me approach that we've been piloting in Bristol. Do feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. Please note that only the panelists are visible on your screen. It isn't a technical glitch if you can't see yourself. And you are also muted. So feel free to make all the noise you want in the background. This session is being recorded and it will be published on YouTube and on our website after the event. We will share a link to the recording with you all after the event. There will be opportunities to ask questions at the end of the webinar. For that, I would ask that you use the Q&A box. So if you go down on your screen, you should see a toolbar with a little Q&A chat box. Please feel free to drop in questions in there throughout the session, and then we'll read them we'll relay them to our panelists at the end. So a little bit more about Changing Futures before I get us started. Changing Futures is a program funded by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities and the National Lottery Community Fund. We work as a partnership to improve local services for adults and young people who face multiple disadvantage. Our aim is to create sustainable change at individual, service and system level and influence government policy and local commissioning. In Bristol, as I mentioned earlier, we're piloting a My Team Around Me approach as a way of working with people facing multiple disadvantage. Tom and our panelists will tell you a lot more about My Team Around Me in a minute. But as a really short summary, I would say My Team Around Me is a way of working that sees the client surrounded by a dedicated collaborative team to support their needs. The client chooses who is in the team, professionals or any other people that they want involved. So each client has a very different team supporting them to lead a life beyond services. So today's webinar will be looking at what that model looks like on the ground, what the reality of it is for the people who are actually doing it. We are joined today by Tom Dunn, who is our My Team Around Me concept lead here at Changing Futures. We have Connie Halpin, who is a senior probation officer. Sam Wilson, who is the manager of the Link team, and Alan Jarrett, who's our DWP work coach. I should also say that we had one more panelist lined up today from the Bristol Homeless Move On team, because that team is also piloting My Team Around Me. Sadly, Holly is poorly and has had to send her apologies. So before I pass the floor to Tom, I will show you a little video that we've put together to explain the My Team Around Me concepts. So that lasts about 4 minutes. If it'll let me do it. All right, can you see this?
Yep.
We know that people who experience multiple disadvantage can find it difficult to get their support needs met. Siloed funding, a lack of appropriate options, complex assessment and referral processes, and challenging transitions can lead to people being stuck in the system and unable to access the services they need. Organisations across the city aspire to provide person-centred support, but to make the biggest difference, we need to take a system-wide approach. We believe that by working collaboratively, we can unlock the solutions. There is already great partnership work happening, and we want to build on this by creating a structure to support this way of working. in Bristol, we are piloting a system-wide approach called My Team Around Me, where every person is at the heart of their own support plan. Multi-agency teams work with individuals in a collaborative and trauma-informed way to meet their desired goals. This cross-sector, one-team approach involves continuity, regular communication, and contact between services and the people they work with. Time is given to reflect, build trusting relationships, understand each other's service constraints, and work flexibly to improve and adapt existing processes and cultures. By adopting the My Team Around Me approach, we will enable people to shape their own support. We will enhance what we know works well and focus on innovative ways of working and system change. Workers will be able to share tasks and knowledge, generating capacity for the professionals involved. The teams will capture a collective voice, providing stories and examples to influence strategic change and future policy. Working in this way, each team will share a set of principles. We will provide consistent, client-directed interventions, be strengths-based, inclusive, and trauma-informed, hold a reflective, collaborative learning approach, support each other and share accountability, be flexible, sharing data and information, and work creatively around barriers. Be co-produced at every stage. The work is client-led. The My Team Around Me approach will use a variety of working methods, including shared safety and support planning, formulations, strength-based meetings, and support for doing things differently. So what are we asking? We invite our Changing Futures partners and organisations across the city to join or further develop a cross-sector support team around a client, take part in regular communications including shared safety and support planning, stay involved through a client's transitions, work flexibly and creatively to inform new ways of working, ensuring there is time to reflect and learn in collaboration with other services. Allow the client to lead the work. Commit to trauma-informed and strengths-based practice. Be involved with informing wider strategic system change activity. Together, we can create a system where people with multiple disadvantage can live a life beyond services. For more information, please go to www.changingfuturesbristol.co.uk.
There we go. So that was a little introduction video to the concept of My Team Around Me. Right, Tom, you ready to kick us off?
Excuse me, yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name's Tom Dunn. I am the My Team Around Me concept lead for Changing Futures. So my role really I'm working across the kind of operational and strategic side of things, but I'm going to really sort of talk about the sort of strategic and developmental side of My Team Around Me. So as mentioned in the video, we've really kind of structured My Team Around Me around 4 objectives. So that's the service continuity that the video mentions, shared accountability, the client-led element, and then this innovation and reflection and learning. So I'm just going to talk a bit about that. What we've realized is that, this is very much an operational model, and, from the outside, it's very much about how we're working with clients in the system operationally. But to achieve this, we really need the strategic support around that. The whole project is all about collaboration. So it's very much about those partnerships and those relationships between services and working as a whole. So when we talk about service continuity within this team of professionals, we're really looking for that longer term engagement from professionals. So particularly through transitions, and there's something we notice in the system is that clients can experience that dropout from services, and we need that consistency. So strategically, we're looking for that buy-in, and it's really important that when professionals are working in partnership, that they have that support and understanding from their own management, senior management, and what have you. So communication and briefing is really, really important. So we have developed resources. So we have a compact agreement. We've got a briefing document. We've got lots of communication tools. We also have lots of training resources, and we're really taking on a learning approach. So within our partnership, particularly with the Link team, and Sam can talk about that today, and we had the adult social care team, the homeless move on team, who was going to be present. We're trying to work in a very much a learning approach together. So setting up those structures to really come together and learn is really important. Within service continuity as well, you know, we're not just looking for people who are working necessarily with clients, we're looking for advisory roles. So if you look at maybe probation workers or maybe mental health services, if someone's gone into prison, the probation worker can stay in the team through that transition, maybe through a recall. Mental health services, maybe early intervention. So asking care coordinators or recovery navigators to come in as an advisory role, to pre-assessment, to have that engagement. We're then looking at shared accountability. So what does that really mean? You know, it's really working as a whole system. So setting up that group live communication and that daily communication. So having those systems in places and that commitment. Again, you know, each worker being supported by the organisation to stay involved in that communication longer term. So this idea of problem solving together, reflecting together. It's really important to have resources to support that. So we have developed a strength-based toolkit, which is a strength-based method within multi-agency settings. We are offering formulation as a key approach. We have recently developed a collective safety planning tool, which is useful for trying to create that kind of multiple perspective approach to risk management and safety. And it's not there to replace existing risk assessment processes, but just to enable that dialogue and that creativity and that client voice to be in there around someone's safety. And then information sharing agreements, really important. This is a challenge in the system, and I'm sure you'll recognize, but just trying to build that trust and that collaboration within the system and making sure information sharing is understood and agreed, just to open up a bit more of a flow around information sharing. Client consent being key with that. Then the client-led element. So really we're looking for the system to adapt to what the client is asking for. So the client wishes, and bringing that to the foreground. So again, you know, there can be challenges around, you know, flexing the system or being innovative or creative. So having that backing and that support from senior management, CEOs, from commissioners, to be able to work differently, and for that to be rewarded, for that to be recognized. So it's really important that that's understood, and we can, you know, build those relationships, but also those communication channels to really brief people and for everyone to have that consistent understanding and awareness. That takes a long time, and we're not there yet, but certainly we are getting there. And we've got Connie here today who will talk about that a little bit more. And then that leads to the final area, which is the innovation. So we're really looking to build that culture around positive risk taking. So really, you know, looking for new innovative ways of working and empowering those who are closest to the client and the client to think about different ways of working. So that system flex, that system change, you know, how big, how small, you know, we're really asking people and giving them the parameters and the methods to really explore different ways of working. And that can lead on to longer term change, which feeds up into our strategic sort of system change approach. We've got a creative solution board, which is something else we could talk about, but having that clear communication around, you know, people above listening and taking on the learning which has happened on the ground, but really that thread of change through the client client's voice and then working with that and adapting. We've had recent success around that as an example with some housing allocation. So, you know, working with what the client wants from being, you know, living in a tent and being safe within the area and making sure housing is met within those wishes for that person to live there. So it's all about clarity, it's all about understanding, it's all about communication, it's all about relationships and building those partnerships. So, you know, but creating that support and permission at all levels to be able to work in this way. So just setting up those processes to do that, whether it's formal documentation in government through to collaborative spaces and learning spaces which you've created. Really rewarding and recognizing that innovation. So just, you know, just to kind of share, you know, what we're saying about Mighty Around Me is that Mighty Around Me is a cultural shift. And so when we look at system change, Mighty Around Me is system change, and this is what we're saying. So just to work more collaboratively, think about relationships, think about learning, and then, you know, hopefully we can enable the system to be what it wants to be. So that's a quick overview from me. I'm going to pass on to Connie, who is talking about partners. We've been working quite closely in terms of briefing and communicating and helping partner organizations to embed this practice. So yeah, over to you, Connie.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Connie Halpin. I'm a Senior Probation Officer in the Bristol area. So I started working with Tom at the start of this year. We have had various meetings initially to sort of understand the concept of My Team Around Me and how we can work together and look to embed that within our organisation. So between us, we have created a shared compact agreement, which Tom, you mentioned earlier. So a sort of arrangement which sets out exactly what is expected from practitioners within the service if they are working to this model, but also sort of parameters of which they can work within that have been agreed by management at my level, but also management above me, so senior management. I guess giving people that reassurance that reassurance to kind of work a bit more creatively and flexibly, with the view really to creating more positive outcomes for the people that we work with, which is exactly what we want to achieve. So we have had that signed off now. We've got the compact agreement. The next step from that was for us to jointly hold briefings with staff members across our service, and specifically those that are working with clients within the My Team Around Me Changing Futures cohort. So that has had good take up from staff, really. We've held one briefing. We'll be running the next one later today, actually. And I think from those briefings, we've had some really good discussions with staff about how we can start to adapt the way that we work. So specifically, one of the things that we focused on in the first briefing was around service continuity. So what we do find is obviously the clients that fall within this cohort can live quite chaotic lifestyles, and that part of that can involve going in and out of prison for periods of time, and that can create a bit of a barrier to the relationships that we have with those individuals, because naturally what will happen within our service is they go into prison and they will then be handed over to offender management within the prison service, and our work will sees at that point until they are then coming back out of prison. One of the things that we have reviewed in line with these discussions is around that continuity of involvement, and that forms part of the compact agreement that we've had signed off by senior management. So for practitioners to stay involved with those individuals, and have that ongoing liaison with the professionals that are involved with them whilst in prison, and wherever possible for those clients to then come back to the same practitioner when they're then being released back into the community, so that we have that sort of continuity of professionals that are involved, which obviously can be invaluable to some clients, and not having to sort of form new relationships with professionals on a regular basis. So that's just an example of one of the things that we are looking to implement. I've also had some discussions outside of the briefings that we've held with staff around, which kind of to me demonstrates that people are starting to think in different ways and think creatively about how they can engage with the clients within my team around me and sort of create better outcomes rather than the same repeated cycles that we see with people. So I've had conversations with practitioners who are saying, you know, having attended the briefings and listened to this new way that we should be working towards, what's your advice on enforcement? In, I would typically be going down this route when someone isn't engaging with their order, but how can we think differently and utilize the other professionals that are involved around the individual to avoid going down the same routes and seeing these kind of negative outcomes for the individuals that we're working with. So again, it's kind of reassuring to see that people are taking that on board and starting to think in different ways about what we can be doing. So I guess for us, the sort of next steps really is to be implementing this across the whole staffing group, and part of the way that we want to do that is one of the things I'm thinking about is getting practitioners involved in some of the cross-sector reflective sessions, helping to sort of build those relationships with other professionals within the area. And Tom only mentioned briefly about creative solution board, but that will be something that I will then start to sit on so that I can be involved in those discussions as well and be supporting staff with those more, innovative ways and learning different practices. So that's kind of where, we're at from our service.
Thank you, Connie. That's really valuable. Sam, I'm coming to you next. I think it'd be good if you just gave a really short explanation of what the link team does and then talk about your bit.
Yeah, sure. I was just aware there's people that aren't from Bristol, and even people within Bristol may not know what the link team is, so that's no problem. Good morning. My name is Sam Wilson. I am the team manager for the link team, which is a relatively new service in Bristol. It's a partnership service funded by NHS England to bridge gaps in service provision for people who are street homeless, who experience mental health difficulties. People we work with experience multiple disadvantage and often kind of furthest from services, face multiple barriers to accessing and engaging with the wider support in the city. So I've been asked to talk about being client-led and how this fits in with the My Team Around Me approach. So I think for us, being truly client-led is key to facilitating a relational approach, which is at the heart of every aspect really of the way the link team works and our values. This thread runs right through our work, from the very first contact with people through to how we think about how we engage with someone and really maximize that, through to the language we use, through to kind of thinking ahead and planning for transitions and endings. And it's a core component of the My Team Around Me model and cohesive support. I think in terms of our first contact with people, and a very initial engagement, being truly client-led really means meeting people with no fixed agenda, not turning up with a service agenda, or even sort of practitioners filled their mind full of ideas, but just turning up with a fully open mind and a blank canvas, really. One of the things we've recognised is that forms and paperwork can be a real barrier towards engagement and building a trusting relationship with people, and that can often reflect a more service-led approach. You're turning up and this is kind of what we're going to do, this is what we need to do. So we try to think about ways that we can reduce that, make it less impactful. An example of this is that we created a verbal consent form. So this enables practitioners to record and sign that actually they've had a conversation with someone and they've given verbal consent that they could share information with another agency. So this gives an alternative option, basically, with the intention of really minimising service required processes and maximising client-led spaces. It's really important that the places and spaces that we meet people are client-led in order for someone to feel safe and comfortable and to maximise engagement. So we meet people where they're at, where they feel most comfortable. That could be on the streets, it could be in a cafe, in a community hub, it could be an appointment, pre-existing appointment they've got somewhere, at the pharmacy. It literally would be wherever that person feels most comfortable, where sort of fits what they're doing at that time. And we've had rule changes in meetings in car parks and things before when that's been suitable. Rather than expecting people just to come to an appointment that we're sort of dictating where that's going to be, and it's based on the service need. For us, positive engagement really involves doing an activity alongside someone, often, and that will be client-led. This promotes a relational approach and can really help to equalise power in the relationship. We often we find that clients are able to talk more openly when they're involved in an activity that they're invested in and they're doing alongside someone. We have a protected client budget that we can access that can facilitate activities. Examples of the activities that we would do alongside someone could literally include everyday activities, so we wouldn't even need a budget for those. And sometimes it's just a case of finding out what somebody is going to be doing and getting alongside them in that activity, which might be walking from A to B, it might be doing some shopping with them, it might be looking something up online, but it also could be sitting in a park, go to the gym. We've even taken someone roller disco because that's what they really wanted to do, and that was where we used that as a foundation to establish that relationship and that trust. I'm just going to give a brief example about a client who we're going to call Joe, who really wanted to prioritise going to the gym over some other task-based kind of support activities that he really needed to do, such as going to the bank and sorting out some ID and things like that. But one of the positive aspects to Joe's request to go to the gym is that he's confident in that space, and he describes it as his thing. And in the words of Joe's worker, this is what Joe's worker said to me: Joe completely took the lead. He made a workout plan, he directed the session, involved exercises, sets, reps, breaks, motivational conversation. His worker said it was a great bonding opportunity that strengthened the relationship, but also created some equalising of power through this role reversal, that the worker was the person asking the questions and the client had the answers to those and was leading the session. He said, I saw a very different side to Joe, caring, almost parental. There's something there about being client-led in terms of that's what he wanted to do, but also client-led in the sense that he actually literally did take the lead. And this is the bit that's really interesting in terms of my team around me approach, is that the trust developed between Joe and his link worker has been really pivotal in him sort of moving forwards and accepting, for example, an offer of accommodation and feeling able to settle in there, attending introductory meetings with his social worker, engaging in mental health treatment requirements from the court, and initiating his own health appointments within primary care settings. So there's a term that you may or may not have come across called epistemic trust, which is a really helpful term actually, because it effectively describes that process. So it's basically defined as an individual's willingness to consider new information from another person as trustworthy and relevant, and therefore potentially worthy of integrating into their lives. So in Joe's case, he felt more able to consider and place value in the introduction of new workers or services, or the suggestion of different ways of working, knowing that these had come from a trusted worker who he'd already established a healthy attachment with and a sense of connectedness with. I think also another thing just wanted to mention really is that sort of like the way we plan support is always really informed through listening to clients' wishes and what they would like to do. They could centre around things that are really basic needs, such as clothes, foods, income, those sorts of things, which are often at the forefront of people's minds when we first meet them. Plans can also involve supporting people to explore choices which may seem to us unattainable or unsuitable. And I think that's really important. And just give an example of this. So there's a client who we're going to call Ray, who approached this worker asking for support to access housing in London. So Ray had no local connection to London, and so his worker knew that this goal was going to be unlikely to be quite unattainable. But rather than shutting down Ray's request, his worker explained that he didn't think it would work and explained the reasons for that. But then actually they continued to explore this option together, following Ray's wishes. And this obviously demonstrated that his worker, was listening to him and hearing what Ray really wanted. Ray's worker said, it's really important to help clients feel that they have control over something and that their requests are being taken seriously. So Ray and his worker explored this option of housing in London, and then they received confirmation that it wasn't feasible, it wasn't going to happen. But through that, Ray felt able to adjust his goal, and then they started exploring more local housing options together. Being client-led and exploring these options strengthened their trust and the connection in their relationship. And actually, sometime later, Ray's worker was able to kind of use that trust, really, that they had in their relationship to bridge a connection with another practitioner in a different service who Ray had felt really mistrustful of previously. So again, it's sort of like that sort of idea of this epistemic trust, being client-led, developing a trusting relationship, really helping to link people in with the wider system, with the wider support available, and it's a real benefit in terms of implementing My Team Around Me. That's it for me on client-led approaches.
That's great, Sam. Really interesting, and we've got some lovely comments as well in the chat box. Alan, I'm going to come to you now. You've been working with one of our service coordinators and a young person, and you've had quite a practical, I think, example of what My Team Around Me looks like in practice. So I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hopefully my Wi-Fi connection holds up. I think it dropped out there a minute ago. So yeah, I work as a work coach for DWP here in Bristol. I referred a claimant into the Changing Futures programme and then became part of a team around them, including probation officer, housing officer. And obviously then, yeah, the communication that went on a personal level for me and my job was really useful, as in we obviously have expectations of people claiming universal credit that they've got to come to appointments weekly. We understand there's barriers, but they're looking for work, and also we can be it can feel, I expect for them, that it's a big organization and it's DWP, and they can not be that forthcoming with information which if we know about, we can take into consideration when setting them commitments and expectations of what they'll do work-wise. And so My Team Around Me has been great for helping to share that sort of information, that they've missed appointments, or we know because they've got an important housing meeting, or if they've got a meeting with a probation officer, to not book in appointments they know they can't come to. And so it just seems to take some of the weight off what they have to do, that they don't have to manage all of that diary bureaucracy themselves. But yeah, the example we had was I'd sent them on an employment course here in Bristol called Spear, which is great. He completed that and was really engaged with that. They managed to get him some work experience with Bristol Together that give a construction sort of jobs and experience to people for prison leavers. So he had an interview with that and was starting with that. In this period, he hadn't been sort of attending appointments with me, but through the communication that we have through My Team Around Me, I was aware that this was happening. So it's fine, I mean, I can tick off that he's actually doing stuff to progress him towards work, and so he's ticking off his universal credit obligations. I then had a meeting with him, and he'd had his interview and he'd been accepted on it, but he'd forgotten to ask through the communications. The coordinator had told me that he has got an important housing meeting on the Wednesday after he'd started, and he would need to leave early, and he'd forgotten to mention it in the employment. So I phoned Bristol Together while he was here, talked to the managing director there. Obviously they're fully aware of it and just smoothed all that out for him, said that was fine. So another less thing for him to have to do. So it's nice to be able to step in. It's been nice to be able to step in for each other. You know, I can provide advice about what potentially universal credit can do. We've got flexible support funds, potentially what housing costs will do. So it's a nice information sharing in between the different organisations in the team. We haven't all got that information, and you Google some stuff, but it's not really there, rather than knowing exactly what it is, especially for the circumstances that fit the exact person that you're dealing with. So it's only as good as the communication, and I've got an update that I've been meaning to put on there that I have to put on there this week. So but yeah, it's certainly made my job easier, and I can update his account easier. It's prevented him being sanctioned unnecessarily. It's helped, you know, draw out some more key information from him, and us be able to support him in the way it should be. So I really enjoy that. It's not onerous. We haven't set up set timelines when we communicate. It's just we just update when we've got something to update, and sometimes we'll get chased for that. So it's quite nice having a coordinator that makes us do that. And currently I'm only doing it for one person, so if it was to be extrapolated out to my entire caseload, but you probably have to have more of a formalized way. There's some technical issues obviously with here at DWP that we don't access external team sites and be able to share stuff like that, but we do everything via email, which actually works okay. Everyone's got email, so that goes through all the different firewalls and that. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I can see positive impacts on the person that we're helping, and also from the people that are in the team. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of it. If anyone's got any questions for me, then yeah, feel free.
Thank you, Alan. Tom, did you have any last minute thoughts before I open the floor to questions, or any reflection on what's been discussed?
No, I mean, that's great. I think, you know, what's good is the representation we've got here on the panel just really shines a light on the kind of diversity and, you know, the diversity within the system and the different experience that Mighty Mummy offers, and that Mighty Mummy isn't, you know, one size fit all kind of, you know, consistent approach. It's very much about working dynamically with what the client needs, the different services, and each client's experience is different, each service experience is different. So it's really important just to recognize that. And, you know, we've been able to convey, you know, some of what this looks like, but you know, there are many different stories and many different interpretations or way of looking at it. So just to share that, really, and that's the importance of communication and collaboration and learning really around that.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so we've already got a few questions that have popped up, so I'll get us started, and feel free to pitch in, everyone. So I think the first question is, what's the difference between a multi-agency meeting and the My Team Around Me? Who wants to take that one, Tom?
Well, I was going to say Sam, but I think between me and Sam, I think, so we are asked this question quite regularly about how is Mighty Mummy different to conventional multi-agency practice? And these four objectives really, you know, were set up to answer that question. So how is it different? You know, conventionally, and, you know, people on this call might recognize that we're very good at the system to be working in silos, and you're in a multi-agency setting, and, you know, things can be quite competing, maybe a bit of blame culture can come in and what have you. Really, we're inviting, you know, a more trauma-informed, client-led, strength-based discussion. So trying to break that, you know, competitive siloed communication to more of a, maybe we don't know, you know, let's try and do something different together. And, you know, so we do have resources around that. So the strength-based toolkit really helps. And the new collective safety planning tool we have really invites dialogue reflection and really puts the client at the foreground. Sam, I don't know if you want to mention a bit about the strength-based toolkit.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, the strength-based toolkit. So it is actually available for to be downloaded. It was developed through Golden Key, which is a lottery-funded program that ended last year, and it's just through learning with working alongside people with multiple disadvantage that actually, you know, a lot of the time meetings are arranged, you know, to deal with kind of perceived difficulties when people feel stuck, when there's an incident or a crisis, and everyone gets together and wants to talk about that. And actually, you know, it's to try and shift the emphasis really, and to think about let's celebrate, you know, the things that are going well, things that have gone well, learn from things that have gone well in the past, talk about what the strengths and resources are, and use those as a platform to really then move forward with coming up with plans for what the issues are currently. Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you. I think that the difference really in terms of the My Team Around Me approach is, from a link team perspective, it's really important for working with people who are experiencing multiple disadvantage. It's, you know, it's a really sort of comprehensive approach to being quite cohesive as a team, quite persistent in the approach. Like Tom said, it incorporates kind of like a whole range of sort of practices, skills, and values to really try and create opportunity for change for people who experience multiple disadvantage, who either themselves or the team around them feel really kind of stuck, I suppose, by more conventional kind of, you know, sort of usual kind of traditional practices and support experiences. And I certainly think that, you know, what we want sort of staff to do that are working with this model is to feel empowered to work in a different way. So there's something about encouraging. So for me as a team manager, it's really encouraging my staff members to feel able to think outside the box, to be innovative, to step outside of usual practices, and really think about how they can affect positive change. And so like, so they know they've got kind of resources, or they've got the backing of their manager. And actually, if you know, they know that if I haven't got the answer, or individually or within our organization, we can try and find a way to escalate that and bring as many people at the right level within the system together to try and come up with something, a solution, a way of working that might help lead to some sort of positive change.
Thank you both. Our next question is, when it comes to choosing professionals to be in the My Team Around Me, how meaningful is the choice offered to clients?
I can start again with that one if you want, and then Sam, maybe as you're closer to the work, you might add to this. But something we're recognizing is really the kind of trauma recovery of our clients. So, you know, when we're looking at services, you know, recognizing the context of these, particularly the cohorts we're working with who are street homeless, those who have no recourse to public funds, you know, women who are, you know, at high risk of abuse and what have you, and there's a real lack of trust with services. So a lot of the time we're looking at these sort of crisis emergency services. So when the client's choice around that is very much about, you know, that need for safety and that need for stability. So you often get that kind of, you know, conventional services that we all are aware of. However, what we would hope to see over time is a shift in that. So where the client really starts to own their team, we think the success of My Team Around Me might be evident in how the membership of the team changes. So you're going from emergency crisis services to maybe more community-based, longer-term kind of, you know, well-being based, bringing in family members or social networks, you know, faith groups, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's something in that in terms of how meaningful it is for the client, very much in the context of where they are in their recovery.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are obviously going to be limitations with, you know, availability of being able to just offer people, you know, whatever kind of worker they want, I suppose, in a way. And I think it's definitely something that we're working on. I think we're in the early stages of the development of that. I think there's a really important consideration is that in terms of kind of like the relational aspect of this, that it's kind of understanding what the request's about, really. If somebody's saying I want to work with this particular person, but actually it's trying to understand has there been a sort of is that based on a sort of difficulty in their relationship with someone that they're currently working with? And is that something, because we recognise that rupture and repair is an important part of the work, that actually that, you know, people do, you know, have bumps in their relationship, and actually a way of really effectively supporting someone and helping them in their journey is to work through some of those things. So I think it's about really understanding what people are asking for and trying to work with them to achieve that in a helpful way. I think I could give a really quick example as well of a way in which we have really taken on board somebody's requests about the way we work and who's involved and things. So we had a team around a client, a number of people involved, and the client made it very clear actually that they didn't, you know, there's a lot of people involved, and that's because we needed like the different kind of perspectives and specialisms there, but the client didn't really want to engage with all those people at once. And there's a certain I think adult social care was a service they said they'd been very clear they didn't want to be working with, but actually there was a need for them to have a care act assessment to really understand their care needs. And so what was agreed was that there was 2 people that they felt they had trusted relationships with, that they would work with those people, and they would kind of ask those questions and gather that information that was needed for the care act assessment, and that would then be fed back to the social worker. And so that was a way that the client was able to kind of feed in, you know, how we could consider who was directly in the team around the client, but still involve kind of the wider kind of expertise in the system.
Thank you, Sam. Another question that kind of leads on from this one, and I'm hoping maybe Connie and Alan can answer it in their own way. Does the client attend their own meetings, and what happens if they don't, kind of thing? Can they give consent, for example, for the meeting to be held without them? So I don't know, Alan, Connie, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I'll go to Connie if it's okay. I'll go first. We obviously always want people to attend themselves, and with DWP and that, there are potential good reasons to not doing it. And I've got a process that I have to follow here, and this way it works well in regards to the framework that the DWP sort of works in, regarding that decision makers will make decisions on whether things are good reason or not. So sometimes, you know, and I explain this to the claimant themselves, of actually attending their appointments is how high they put universal credit up in their list of priorities, and how much can I protect them, you know, how much do they need the money, and this is what they need to be able to do that. But obviously the information then that we get in from the team helps inform myself and decision makers to be able to make decisions straight away without it becoming it goes too far. So there's been plenty of times where the person I'm doing it hasn't attended their meeting, but I know they've been somewhere else, so it's fine, and I put that as a good reason. We don't really talk about things and make decisions without them being there. I don't think that's particularly right. Do you know what I mean? We will, you know, use our communication to, when they've got them in front of them, and say, oh, don't forget you've got a universal credit appointment on Friday, or there's this or that. So just as a reminder. So that's how we as a team do things. So yeah, we're not sort of meeting and discussing things without them.
Connie?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it is kind of a combination of the two. So more often than not, it will be that obviously the client is there and is involved in those discussions. You know, that is exactly what the sort of core of it is, isn't it? Is it being client led, and them having, you know, not decisions made to them, you know, being involved in that process. But I know that there are also kind of additional meetings with professionals that are then taking place to, you know, discuss where things are at and any kind of actions that need to be taken by other people. So I think it is kind of a combination, but majority that client is involved in those discussions.
Thank you. Next one, I think I'm going to ask Tom and Connie to answer that one, possibly. And I might actually combine 2 questions here. One is, given that many of the system professionals in my team around me are stretched and can experience quite high staff turnover, how do we deal with professionals moving on to other opportunities, you know, from a service continuity point of view. And then there's another question straight after, and I think we could probably combine them a little bit. Given that time is short, how can we support organizations to commit My Team Around Me and see the benefits of releasing staff to engage? So I'm thinking here there's something about how do we manage, you know, the staff turnover and the pressures that we have in the system, and how do we embed My Team Around Me? Tom, do you want to start?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, there are realities to service continuity, of course, and we know that staff turnover is, you know, inevitable. So we have to work with that. I think, you know, Sam was talking about this idea of epistemic trust. I think, you know, the relationship is really, really important. I think, you know, having dedicated My Team Around Me coordinators who often have this closer relationship enables some continuity in terms of, you know, that relational continuity, even though the other members might change. So the epistemic trust is there. But we also talk about kind of, you know, part of the work is to extend that trust to not just one individual, but to a service. So, you know, those clients who have that good trusting relationship with a worker from a service will often know other workers, or at least trust the service, and that handover, you know, and that's key, I think, is to ensure that there's a planned handover with any workers. But it is inevitable, and you know, part of the work is to enable clients to, you know, again, Sam talked about rupture and repair, and, you know, being able to build relationships and recognize that relationships end and they start, but then having that experience of new relationships is only positive for someone's growth and recovery. So, yeah.
Connie, did you have any thought on how you manage that as a manager?
Yeah, I mean, it is a tricky one, really, because, yeah, staff turnover can, you know, sort of go against some of the stuff that we're talking about here. So I think, as Tom says, there is limitations, and we have to be kind of realistic about that. I think it is, you know, when I go back to sort of the example we were using earlier about those sort of transition periods as well, it's about staff being able to communicate between each other. So even if there is somebody new that's going to be taking over for whatever reason, if that's because someone's moving into another role, or because the client is transitioning into a different, you know, part of their life, whether that be that they are going into prison and out, or their orders are ending and then moving on to work with different professionals. It's just about that kind of communication between everybody, and not sort of sitting with the same process of my role has ended, so, you know, those sort of harsh endings. It's about those sort of continuity of relationships, and making sure that there are staged handover processes with that, and staying involved in, you know, kind of communications either with or around the client wherever possible, as opposed to, like I say, just those sort of, my role has ended and now I'm stepping away from it. So they're the sort of conversations that we're having, but that, you know, will obviously take time to embed, and how that sort of looks in practice. So yeah, that's where we're at from our perspective.
Thank you, Connie.
Can I just follow on from what Connie
said?
said?
Yeah, of course you can.
I'm just thinking that one of the practices that we've found really helpful over the last kind of 18 months or so is invite, where we know that, because there is a lot of held knowledge in the system, so a lot of the clients we work with have been around multiple, you know, services and organizations and practitioners, and we've just not been afraid to reach out to people that we know have been involved in the past, and even though they're currently working in a different role in a different organization, possibly invited them to come along, obviously with the client's consent, to share what they know, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, any information they've got, and be a part of, you know, we have multi-agency formulations that our psychologists facilitate. So we really try and get as much as many people in the room as we can. And we've had some really interesting success by inviting past workers and bringing them in and sort of having a bit more of a cohesive understanding of someone's experiences.
There was a question in a chat quite early on from our colleagues in Northumbria who are piloting, I think, a fairly similar approach. Tom, they were asking specifically about how we capture the learning from My Team Around Me.
Yeah, nice question. We've set up a variety of methods of doing that. I think, you know, I mentioned the learning approach that we've embedded. So we meet regularly as a team in Changing Futures, but then, as I say, as a partnership, then we have learning groups outside of that to bring partners in. We've even set up cross-agency reflective practice. So the learning around My Team Around Me is very much capturing those conversations and the themes that are emerging out of this. I mean, you know, even today having this conversation and, you know, hearing both Connie and Sam talk about My Team Around Me from their positions, you know, it's there, isn't it? So we do our best to try and capture those themes. We do have a review tool as well, which we've set up to evaluate how, and I mean, it's more of a kind of coaching tool rather than any kind of you know, monitoring tool, but it's a method to really kind of reflect on what's happening within the team and around these 4 objectives. So they're very relational questions, and we've actually got a tiering system within that, but there are stories and narratives around that, so we're able to collate that information as well, alongside case studies. And then we do have an external evaluator who's actually holding, you know, a much kind of wider scale evaluation. And so we've got key learning coming from that. Sorry, my dog's chewing something down there. So yeah, the evaluation is, you know, capturing lots of detail at all levels as well. So we've commissioned external evaluation on top of all of the other stuff.
Thank you, Tom. We have a couple more questions, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. I'm always amazed by how quick these webinars go. So I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to say thank you, everyone, for coming today. A particular thank you to Tom, Connie, Sam, and Alan as well for sharing your experiences today. I thought it was really valuable and really showcases what's happening on the ground and kind of the kind of challenges that we're facing when trying to work in this way. If you want to find out more about My Team Around Me, please go to the learning page on the Changing Futures Bristol.co.uk website, or you can also sign up to our newsletter for updates. I'll be sending the link to the recording after the event. I'll also send a link to the strength meeting toolkit that Sam mentioned, and I'll give us a quick listen again to see what else we could share with you all to make sure that you get all the information that was shared today. Do feel free as well to share this webinar, the recording, with your colleagues. Please feel free to talk to them about it. I know that Tom is quite keen as well to support people. That's part of his job. So if you had any specific questions or you really needed support with working in a My Team Around Me way, I'm sure Tom would be more than happy to have a chat with you. So there we are, it's 10 o'clock and I am going to wish you